Kodak once controlled 90% of film sales and 85% of camera sales in America. At its peak in 1997, Kodak's market value hit nearly $30 billion. It employed over 45,000 people and owned the word photography itself. Then, in 2012, the company that invented the future filed for bankruptcy. Here's the twist almost no one knows. In 1975, a 24-year-old Kodak engineer named Steven Sasson built the world's first digital camera. It was the size of a toaster, took 23 seconds to capture a black and white image, and stored it on a cassette tape. He walked it into a room of Kodak executives and showed them the future. Their response became one of the most infamous lines in business history. That's cute, but don't tell anyone about it. Kodak didn't miss the digital revolution. Kodak built it first, patented it, and buried it. Because in 1975, film wasn't just Kodak's business. It was 70 cents of every profit dollar the company made. Protecting that cash machine felt like common sense. No one in that room could imagine it was actually a countdown. The clock on Kodak's own invention had just started ticking. Steven Sasson was 24 years old, a Kodak engineer with a soldering iron and a strange assignment. In 1975, working in a basement lab in Rochester, New York, he built the impossible. It was a toaster-sized box of scavenged parts weighing 8 pounds. It took 23 seconds to capture a single grainy image at 0.1 megapixels. Sasson carried it to his managers and pressed the button. The image appeared on a television screen. Kodak executives had just watched the future of photography with their own eyes. Their response became legend inside the company. That's cute, but don't tell anyone about it. At the time, Kodak controlled roughly 90% of film sales and 85% of camera sales in America. The company employed over 120,000 people, almost all of them tied to a single business, chemical film. Digital photography needed no darkroom, no rolls, no processing fees. It threatened the most profitable pipeline in American manufacturing history. So Kodak did something almost unthinkable. It patented Sasson's invention, then buried it. The company that owned the future decided the future was bad for business. For the next 2 decades, that patent would sit largely dormant. Meanwhile, the seed of a $30 billion collapse had already been planted, quietly, in 1975. But the worst decision was still to come. By 1976, Kodak controlled 90% of every roll of film sold in America. Nearly 9 out of 10 cameras in U.S. homes carried the Kodak name. Its film division ran profit margins near 70%, the richest manufacturing business in the country. That empire employed 145,000 people, built entirely on chemistry, paper, and silver halide. Then, in a quiet Rochester lab, a 24-year-old engineer built something that could erase all of it. His name was Steven Sasson. In 1975, he assembled the world's first digital camera, a toaster-sized box with no film inside. It took 23 seconds to capture one black and white image at 0.1 megapixels. Sasson carried it to Kodak's executives, expecting excitement. Instead, he got a warning, "That's cute, but don't tell anyone about it." The technology worked. The math terrified them. A camera that needed no film threatened every roll, every darkroom, every dollar of that 70% margin. So Kodak did something almost unthinkable. It patented the invention, then buried it. The company that owned the future decided the future was too dangerous to sell, but the invention didn't disappear. Somewhere in Japan, engineers were watching the same technology and asking a very different question. A 24-year-old engineer walks into a lab in Rochester, New York. His name is Steven Sasson, and Kodak just handed him a small assignment. By 1975, he's built something no one has ever seen, a camera with no film at all. It weighs 8 pounds, the size of a toaster, and takes 23 seconds to capture one black and white image. He carries it to his bosses, expecting applause. Instead, he hears the sentence that will haunt Kodak for the next 3 decades. "That's cute, but don't tell anyone about it." Kodak files the patent anyway, quietly, in 1978. Then the invention disappears into a corporate drawer. Why bury the future? Because film is printing money. 90 cents of profit on every dollar of sales. Digital threatens the very system feeding 100,000 employees and a $10 billion empire. So Kodak's executives make a calculated bet, sit on the technology, protect the cash cow, control the timeline. They believe they have decades to prepare. They are wrong. The invention that could have made Kodak the king of digital photography sits patented, powerful, and completely unused. Somewhere in Japan's Silicon Valley, others are watching the same technology, and they are not waiting, and chose to lock it away. Kodak didn't bury the digital camera. They built an empire designed to strangle it slowly. By 1988, Kodak employed 145,000 people, almost all of them tied to film. Executives ran the math. A digital print cost cents, a Kodak film roll sold for profit margins near 70%. Digital threatened to cannibalize the very cash flow funding the company. So Kodak chose a strange strategy. License the future, don't own it. In 1994, Kodak engineers quietly built the Quick Take 100 for Apple. Kodak's own name never went on it. Between 1975 and 2003, Kodak poured over $5 billion into digital research. Almost none of it built a digital business under the Kodak brand. Instead, in 1996, Kodak joined 4 rivals to launch the Advanced Photo System, a hybrid camera designed to keep film alive. The consortium spent over $1 billion propping up a format already dying. Wall Street cheered. Kodak's stock climbed, film sales held, shareholders stayed calm. But inside the company, engineers who once celebrated the 1975 prototype watched competitors sprint past them. Sony, Canon, Casio. Each one building what Kodak had already invented 20 years earlier. Kodak wasn't losing the race. Kodak had built the track, handed out the shoes, and stayed at the starting line. The digital future Kodak once owned outright was now everyone's to take. And the bill for that decision was about to come due. Eastman Kodak, founded in 1888, files for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection. The company that once owned 90% of camera sales and 85% of film sales in America can no longer pay its bills. It listed $675 billion in assets against $675 billion in debt, a company eating itself evenly to zero. The stock, which traded near 94 a share in 1997, was delisted from the New York Stock Exchange at 36 cents. To survive, Kodak auctioned off over 1,100 digital imaging patents, the very technology it invented and buried in 1975. The winning bid, $525 million, split among Apple, Google, Samsung, and Facebook. The company that shelved the digital camera was now selling its ghost to the companies that used it to bury Kodak's film business for good. At its peak in 1988, Kodak employed 145,300 people worldwide. By the time it emerged from bankruptcy in 2013, that number had fallen to roughly 8,500. 94% of the workforce? Gone. Steven Sasson, the engineer who built that first digital camera in 1975, never received a bonus, a patent windfall, or a promotion for the invention that could have saved the company. He was told, "That's cute, but don't tell anyone." Kodak didn't fail to see the future. It saw it first, and chose to protect the past instead. The lesson is simple, and it is timeless. The thing that makes you rich today can be the very thing that kills you tomorrow, if you refuse to let it. Somewhere in a Rochester archive sits the first digital photo ever taken. 0.01 megapixels, grainy, and 45 years ahead of its time. The only question Kodak never answered was the one it asked itself first. What if we had believed our own invention?